obandesu. The well had been covered for generations. He was told to leave it covered. He kept that agreement for 2 years, until a drought made the clear cold water too tempting. He opened it once, replaced the cover afterward. But something had changed in the house since that morning, something that moved through the house at night, following a path that ended at the well and went back down. Don't remove any covers tonight that you were told to leave in place. It is time for chapter 151. Some agreements are made without full explanation. Leave the well covered. Do not remove the cover for any reason. The instruction delivered simply, without elaboration, as though the reason should be self-evident to anyone paying attention. Most people in most situations accept such instructions and keep them. But instructions without reasons are difficult to maintain indefinitely against practical pressure, against drought, against the sight of clear cold water visible through a gap in an old wooden cover on a hot summer morning, against the entirely reasonable thought that one opening, just once carefully replaced afterward, could not possibly matter. It matters. A family had moved into a rural property 2 years before the summer of the drought. The house was old, the garden large, the well at the far end of the garden covered with a heavy wooden board, stones piled on top, a length of old rope wound around both. The previous owner, an elderly man selling the property to move closer to his family, had been specific about the well. Leave it covered. Do not remove the covering for any reason. He had not explained why. Had said only that it had been covered for as long as he had owned the property and for as long as his father had owned it before him, and that it should remain covered. The father had agreed without question, had kept the agreement easily for 2 years, until the drought. The drought was the 3rd consecutive dry summer. The garden was suffering. The household water supply from the municipal system had been subject to restrictions. The father looked at the well on a particularly hot morning and thought about the clear cold water he could see through a gap in the wooden cover. Thought about the garden, about the restrictions, about the elderly man's instruction and the absence of any explanation for it, removed the stones, unwound the rope, lifted the wooden cover and set it aside. The water was clear and cold and deep. He drew several buckets, used them in the garden, replaced the cover, replaced the rope and stones, the whole process taking perhaps 20 minutes. He went back to the house feeling that he had been practical and sensible. That evening something was different in the house. If these stories have found their way to you, if you find yourself returning to this quiet room, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. It tells me, and whatever else watches from this room, that you were here and that you intend to find your way back. If you have a story of your own, Granny is always listening, watching, waiting. The difference was not dramatic, simply a quality in the house that had not been present before that morning, a sense of something moving through the rooms at night, not heard exactly, no footsteps, no sounds that could be clearly identified, simply the particular awareness of movement in spaces that should have been still. The father woke the first night and lay in the dark listening. Nothing audible, simply the sense. He got up and checked the house. Nothing visibly wrong. Went back to bed. It happened again the second night, and the third. On the fourth night, he got up and followed the sense of movement rather than trying to locate its source directly, and found himself standing at the back door, looking out at the garden, at the covered well at the far end, with the particular understanding that whatever was moving through his house at night was using the well as its point of return. Shakkoi. That understanding, cold in a way the summer heat did nothing to address. I wonder, have you ever kept an agreement without being told why, and then broken it just once for what seemed like a perfectly reasonable reason, and felt afterward that the reason was less important than the keeping? If you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening. He contacted the elderly man who had sold them the property, who listened to the description of the nightly movement without surprise, asked whether the cover had been replaced exactly as found, rope and stones in the same positions. The father said yes, as exactly as he could manage. The elderly man was quiet for a moment, then said that what had been in the well had apparently come out when the cover was lifted, and had apparently not gone entirely back when it was replaced, that the rope and stones in specific positions were not simply for weight, were for something else, something the father would need to research if he wanted to understand what he was dealing with, and what, if anything, could be done about it. Duh. The particular tone of a man describing something he had hoped never to have to describe. I have heard it before. You are still here. Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder, if you had been told to leave something covered without explanation, how long before practicality outweighed the instruction? He researched, found references in local historical documents to the well, documents folded inside a family ledger left in the attic by a previous owner. The well was old, considerably older than the house built above it. What the documents described about the well's history was specific and unsettling enough that he did not share the details with his wife or children. Simply returned to the well the following morning with the rope arranged in the specific configuration described in the documents, and waited. The nightly movement in the house gradually diminished over the following weeks. Not immediately, gradually, as though whatever had partially emerged was finding its way back to the depth it had come from. The house returned to its previous quality. He has not touched the cover since. I think about agreements made without explanation. Most of us, when given an instruction without a reason, want the reason, feel entitled to it. And occasionally the absence of a reason feels like sufficient justification for setting the instruction aside when circumstances make it inconvenient. But some instructions exist because the reason is too complicated or too unsettling or too difficult to believe to be worth attempting to explain. Simply leave it covered. Do not remove the covering for any reason. The reason being everything the well's history contains, everything the local historical documents describe, everything the family that owned the property before the elderly man understood about what the covering was keeping in, and trusted that their successors would simply keep covered without needing to know why. Some agreements are their own explanation, if only we could trust that. Another whispered story from Japan, shared quietly here beside the kotatsu. If you move into a rural property and the previous owner tells you to leave something covered, a well, a door, a space in the garden, keep the agreement, even without explanation, even through drought, even when what is inside looks clear and cold and practical on a hot summer morning, because the instruction was given by someone who either knew what was in there from direct experience or had inherited the knowledge from someone who did. And the absence of explanation is not carelessness. It is the recognition that the explanation is too complicated to believe until you no longer need to believe it, because you have already opened it and replaced the cover and found something moving through your house at night toward the well and going back down, and understood, standing at your back door in the dark, that practicality is a poor reason to break an agreement whose terms you did not fully understand. If this story stayed with you, if the dark or the shadow feels a little closer tonight, you know where to find me. I am always here beside the kotatsu, watching, waiting. And if you wish others to find their way here too, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. I would not object. And if you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening.